From the C Squared Studios, this is WedCast, part of the C Squared Radio Podcast Network. Here is your host, Mike Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome back to WedCast on the C Squared Radio Podcast Network. I'm your host, Mike Carroll, and I know last week I had mentioned that this was going to be a episode where I talked about traditions and weddings and kind of give a theory as to how they came about, what I'm calling a Down the Rabbit Hole series. And we're still going to do that. Maybe next week, maybe later on down the road. But 2020, when we're recording this podcast, it's like, it's like a bag with, some little toys in it, and you just keep shaking it up. And we haven't dove too much into it. I mean, of course, the past few episodes you've heard us talk about the lockdown and the coronavirus pandemic, but there's so much going on in the world. And as a business owner and as a host of these podcasts, I've kind of been at a loss for words of what to say. And the same thing with the social media. My social media manager, came to me the other day and said, I don't really know what to say or how you want to say it, what you want to do to comment on what's going on. And I've never really felt it's my place to comment, not for not having an opinion or about caring. Believe me, I care very much about what's going on in the world, but it's mostly just, I don't know it's my place to say anything, or obviously, I believe that we all have a responsibility to say something. I just don't know what to say. For those of you who are wondering what I'm talking about, the past couple of weeks, as a nation, we've been, I don't even know what to call it, but there are issues of race and racism that have been coming to the forefront, and it's enough. Enough is enough. Not the systemic racism that's happening in America has got to stop. And I have always grown up in a world where I don't want to say I don't see color, because that's not realistic. That's not true. But it hasn't mattered. People are people. Humans are humans. We're all brothers. I judge a person by the content of their heart and not the color of their skin. And I would be very naive to say that that's how everybody else lives. I am not a person of color, and I don't even know that I like that term. And it's the sensitivity at which we're dealing with this is unprecedented. I mean, I, as a white male, I don't know what to say, and I don't want to say anything wrong, and but I know that we need to have the conversation. And C Squared Events has always been a diverse company. We have had Asian females, African American males, white males. We've Hispanic males. We look for talent, and talent comes through on the microphone, and it comes through on the turntables, the musical decks, the ones and twos, if you will. And it's something that we're going to constantly be moving forward. So I decided that I was going to sit down with one of my DJs, Grant. Grant's a newer DJ for us, incredibly talented, and he just happens to be black. And the only reason I mention that is because that gives context for the conversation that he and I have. I have, in my time, worked with two of the best DJs that I know as far as music mixing and actually producing music and creating music. And in my time working with them, I have personally experienced, I have to give people the benefit of the doubt and say that it was unintended racism, but I've experienced it. With both of them, I have had guests come up and say, hey, why don't you play, and they'll point at the African-American DJ and say, why don't you play some of their music? And my jaw drops every time because I know these DJs, and shout out to Devin from way back in the day if you're listening, like you are. But Devin was one of the first DJs that I worked with and that I trained, and they came up and said, play his kind of music. And Devin is into all kinds of music. So the first words out of my mouth were, he likes Foo Fighters. So, hold on, we're gonna drop some Dave Grohl for you. And then later on, and this happened not too long ago, it happened with Grant. They came up to him like, play some of his kind of music, and I made the same joke. He likes Foo Fighters, and Grant is actually a house DJ, and we talk about that a little bit in the interview. And these people who were making these comments, they didn't. I don't want to say they're bad people. I have, of course, run across bad people, but they don't understand. They don't know how their words can be hurtful. And I talked about this with Evan. I talked about this with Grant afterwards. And it was like, they both said it was something that they experience on a regular basis, and that it did hurt. It wasn't anything that they were going to let ruin their lives or anything like that, but that they felt it and they knew it was there. And we have to move past that. As Grant and I talk about in our interview, music is universal. It brings everybody together. It's the one commonality amongst all of us, and there's so many links between musical genres and connectivity, and hip hop is just as connected to rock as it is to funk and disco and pop. They're all and I mean even classical music. It blew my mind when I found out that Hook by Blues Traveler was simply canon in D. And if we're going that far back, the links are also there. Shakespeare said there are only like 3 types of stories in this world. And I believe that's true with music. There are only 3 different types, and they're all interconnected and interwoven as we are as a society. And I didn't intend the interview. I didn't intend to start talking with Grant and have a conversation with him about race because I didn't know if he was comfortable. I didn't broach him. I didn't sit down and say, hey, Grant, let's sit down and have an interview where we talk about race, although we probably should. And I think we will. I just wanted to talk to him because he's got a really great story, really super talented. I mean, he's got stuff up on Spotify that just blows my mind. It's so good. And he'll talk about that. And of course, we'll put links so that you can go listen to his work on Spotify. But he's an amazingly talented DJ, and he's a great MC. And that's where I wanted to come from. I want to say, okay, you're a club DJ who is really good on the microphone and really good MC. And so let's talk about that. Let's talk about why not all club DJs are great MCs. Let's talk about how a club DJ approaches a dance floor versus how a wedding DJ approaches a dance floor. And then he mentioned a specific musical genre of how he mixes things. And the second he did that, I'm like, well, okay, can we have this conversation now? And we'll have more, because I feel that's what we need to do as a society from our end. And when I say from our end, I mean those of us who are not African American, Hispanic, Asian American, those of us who are white. We need to have the conversations, and we need to listen to what they're telling us. And if you ever doubted C Squared Event stance or WedCast stance, we stand fully in support of everybody who is shouting at the top of their lungs that they're demanding change. We are with you. We are demanding change. I mean, I talked about this in the first or second episode. Originally, the title of this podcast was Bridecast, and that was clever. I was very, very thrilled to come up with that name because it sounded like broadcast, and that was great. And then it dawned on me how that simple phrase, bride, isn't 100% inclusive. And I don't know if you can tell how worked up I am about this, because I am, because it's something that I'm very passionate about. We are a company for everybody, by everybody, with everybody in mind. We serve it. I say we serve human beings, but as opposed to aliens. And I hope you're getting the intent and the spirit behind this. Because when I was sitting down to record the episode with regards to grand entrances and everything, I just kept going back to the interview that I did with Grant, and we just did it yesterday. So this is the quickest turnaround we've ever done. And it's a great interview. I think you're going to love hearing his story, and we're going to have him back, and we're going to talk. I mean, this is without a doubt. I mean, my intro is now at, my intro is at like 10 minutes. The interview with Grant is just under an hour, maybe even just over an hour. So this is going to be the longest episode of WedCast ever. And we don't even get that deep into the stuff that I want to talk about, the stuff that we need to talk about, the stuff that, why as a business owner am I afraid to send Grant back to the office at the end of the event to unload his equipment? Why I'm worried about him getting pulled over with the equipment in his car. Not for, any reasons other than I just know what can happen. I know some person sees a young black kid unloading equipment, and I don't know. I hope this is all making sense, because I'm not going to re-record it. Even as I'm sitting here thinking about what I'm going to say and how I'm going to say it, I'm nervous because I don't want this to come across as anything other than just the utmost sincere thoughts of mine, because I'm hurt. I know we need to change. I know that we need to come together, that we need to fix this, and I know that the only way it can happen is through conversations. And hopefully it can start with a conversation between me and Grant, and then it will start with a conversation between two others, and so on and so forth. At one point, I equate the fact that Elvis Presley, when he first came out, he was essentially taking music that had been popularized by African American artists, and he was putting his own little spin on it. And that was the birth of rock and roll. And after the interview, Grant said, I had even forgot about that link between Elvis and quote unquote black music. And, the more we bring these things to light, the more we say, hey, we're all connected. We're all a family. I think the sooner we can get to a place we need to be. So enjoy this episode of WedCast. If you like the episode, at the end, leave us a like, give us a subscribe. That'll keep you in the loop for when we release more episodes, and enjoy. Hey, Grant, thanks for taking some time to come on and talk to us. Really excited to have you on the show.
Oh, of course. I appreciate you having me. Not up to too much today anyways. My day off.
Yes, because we as DJs, we work the weekends. That makes it real easy for Monday through Thursday kind of stuff. Tell the listeners about yourself, how you got into DJing, and a little bit of your story.
Wow. So that actually goes all the way back to college. So I originally was an athlete and ran track, and got hurt my sophomore year of college and decided that I needed somewhere else to expend that energy. Sports was where I expended a lot of my emotional, or just like, I guess at that point in time, creative energy when I didn't know what to do with it. And had a career ending injury, or what I decided was, because basically they just wanted to pump me full of cortisone and send me back out there and do surgeries and stuff. And I wasn't about that. I kind of fell in love with DJing, and it wasn't so much an intimate relationship at first. So this was around 2013 when I first really got my hands on the hardware and software and kind of started to delve into it, I kind of wanted to use it kind of like the same way as track, where it was kind of like an exhibitionism thing. And I was like out there, like, doing my thing for people. After like, you know, so many years with, I think we're going on about like 7 now. Yeah, 7 or 8 now. Um, I've kind of developed a really intimate relationship with music, um, and from that has stemmed a career that I'm, really proud of to be in the process of building upon, and using that talent to like make people happy, whether it be at weddings or like at clubs or wherever. Um, so yeah, it kind of started off as kind of like, oh, I'm just going to pick this thing up and it's going to be cool. And now it's like something I couldn't not see myself doing. It's really fun.
It's interesting that you correlate the music and the athletic side of it, is because we don't think of athletics as entertainment, but essentially it is. I mean, that's what athletes are doing. Is there, yes, the accolades and when you get to a certain level, is fun, but ultimately you're out there doing something you love because of the adrenaline rush that you get from performing in front of a group that large. And that's very much how I've always equated weddings. So have come at this from a theater background, and so that's what I use to relate to. But you being an athlete, they're very similar in the sense that you're out there doing what you love to do, and others are getting enjoyment off of it as well. So there's that performance aspect to both.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I think that developing the relationship with music, and that actually comes over time, helps you get a deeper sense of like, I guess what I'm trying to say is the more you develop your relationship with music through doing this and through this career, it helps you own, I guess, that craft or that specific magic of making people happy. It makes it a lot. I guess you find out there's more of like I don't want to say a formula because that makes it seem like, it's something concrete. Like there's not multiple ways, like there's multiple formulas to build many different things. But like you can, with the more you know music, the easier it is to make other people happy. In short, is really what I'm trying to say. Sometimes I rant on when I'm trying to find the right words, but
And you're very right. It isn't a formula, but it's almost like, and you and I are very similar in the sense that we like that whole, you're either left brain or right brain. You and I we're very creative people, but we're also very intellectual people, and we use both sides equally. So the intellectual side of me wants to know where that formula is. And I remember in film school I was like, just show me the formula and I'll duplicate it. And then the left side, the creative side, is like, there's not a formula. You just got to go out and just do what you do, and keep trying to hone it and craft it so that others enjoy it. And that's where the two sides kind of butt heads a little bit. Now in the wedding world, there's this whole, I don't want to say rivalry, but there's a big difference between a club DJ and a wedding DJ. And the difference tends to come in the microphone. And Grant, you're a very good MC as well as a very good mixer. But you also do have that club side as well. And so what is the biggest difference? Not necessarily MC. We know where the differences lie in there, but from approaching a club event versus a wedding, what's the difference with regards to music?
So in regards to music, it goes all the way back to demographic, like your crowd, knowing your crowd really. Also in regards to music, it also has to do with like your presence is different in those two different settings, and I can kind of get on that later. But as far as music, in a club setting, you have a marginalized crowd, and what I mean by that is club nights advertise for the specific genres that are going to be playing on certain nights. They develop certain followings of people because they're known for playing certain music on certain nights, et cetera, et cetera. So when you're playing for a club, I don't want to say it's a little bit easier to find what makes people happy because you at least have that starting genre lane that okay, this is what these people are showing up here for. How can I expand on this with my technique and skills and mixing to make this like a memorable night so people remember me and I have a presence on stage? Then you also have to factor in what your role is in a club setting for the evening. So Whereas a wedding, you're like master MC, so you're the guy for the night. You are on stage. But in a club setting, you have different DJs. You have your openers, you have your headliners, and you have your closers. And each one of these DJs has a specific role to play. Openers are specifically there. And yes, they are technically based on skill level and how new you are to foraying into the club world and the hardware using CDJs. But there is never any shame of being either one of those positions. I honestly love being an opener, a closer over a headliner. Like, obviously, I want to get to the point of being like a main headliner, but opening DJs have the responsibility of opening up the floor for the evening and setting a nice medium tone and kind of warming up the dance floor. And it can be a really cool, um, not only intimate way to get to know the crowd and their vibes to start off, but I mean, you're kicking off the night. It's kind of a cool way to set the tone, but you don't want to be, um, well, for a lack of a better term, you don't want to be the guy who's an opening DJ and you're playing like energy levels that are inappropriate for opening up the floor. Leave that for the headliner. Leave that for, even closers sometimes have some pretty energetic sets. Now, when it comes to playing music at weddings, again, you have to look at your crowd. Uh, Weddings have a way larger mix of a demographic age range of people with different cultures and backgrounds who like all different types of music. So it's about finding a very good mix and keeping that flow and that energy going throughout the evening. And then also when you're emceeing on the mic, you can have a little bit more freedom and fun with that. Whereas in a club setting, a lot of clubs really don't like MCs. I kind of argue either way on that. I do think that in a club setting, when you're a club DJ, there's a lot of things to be said about getting up there, just playing the music, not needing to use your voice to, provide extra energy and hype to the crowd and letting your mixing do the talking. But at the same time, I think it's always nice to, keep the crowd interested and aware, and maybe have another guy who is an MC, who isn't a DJ, and let the DJs do their thing and maybe, introduce them, still make announcements, other things like that. So playing music at a wedding, you're definitely looking for, what I like to do is look for a mix throughout each decade of what I can gauge is probably, from my oldest patron to my youngest patron that's at the wedding, and figure out, the best songs that they've listened to throughout their lifetime, and, work my way up through all the different age ranges. There's obviously some very easy places to start, like 80s, 90s hip hop and pop and things like that. 70s, 80s, disco, dance music, funk, things like that. That kind of hit a very broad stroke, a very broad general group of people. But again, when it comes to wedding performances, you want to make sure people have a memorable night. So maybe finding those niche songs that people may or may not have heard, or forget that they were good because they weren't in the top 40, and throwing those in there, and keeping the mix interesting and lively for everyone. DJing isn't just about picking songs and playing them back to back to back. Spotify can do that. That's what a playlist is called. When you're a DJ, you're really injecting your own personalized energy into the mix through your song choice. If it's available, you're emceeing, how you interact with the crowd, and even how you mix those songs together. One of my favorite things to do, even between club mixing and wedding mixing, is to either find songs that are sampled from each other and play them on top of each other. So like, for example, one of my favorite things to do at weddings that drives people nuts is playing Under Pressure by Queen and then looping Ice Ice Baby's drum beat over that in the background. People lose their mind. And then, and then dropping in Ice Ice Baby, or dropping in, starting with one or the other, lose their mind. Or finding songs where the other day I did in a house mix where the title of the song was, I could eat that every day, or eat that. No, yeah, it's called Eat That. And the second song was called Donut. And literally the house the house chorus literally goes, I could eat that every day I could eat that for breakfast every day. And then like Donut, the song Donut obviously has like a donut sample in it. Like if someone says something about eating a donut, so you can mesh those lyrics together and mesh those energies or those stories of those songs together and come up with something totally new and fun. It's kind of like, I mean, that's what DJing is. It's like painting on the fly. It's like, you're mixing on the fly. You're coming up with different things for people to experience on the fly.
My thing is, and I know you've been with me when I've done this, is I've got my remix "Don't Stop Believing" with the beat of Billie Jean underneath it, and I like to mix it into a point where I'm playing Billie Jean, and then all of a sudden it gets to a point where Billie Jean is not my lover, she's just and then "Don't Stop Believing" kicks in with it, so the crowd hears Billie Jean is not my lover, she's just a small town girl living in a lonely world, and in going back to talking about an opener from a club setting, it's very similar to an opener in a concert. And I have been to a few concerts where, yes, I love the headlining act, but the opener just kind of set a mood. And when couples ask, well, why do you do this or why do you do that? Ultimately, it's so that we can create a mood so that when we get to where we need to be, i.e. a packed dance floor at the end of the night, the guests are already there. That's a lot of the opener for a club is still guiding the energy, and a DJ for a wedding is still guiding the energy. And I love that you talked about the specificity of a club set. Clubs are going to run. This is our '90s flashback night or this night, and that's I would love to do a club just to say I did, but I'm ultimately so geared towards multi-format and open genre that I don't know that I could do. I know when we were in quarantine, I was doing a lot of these themed live sets where I would do like 80s, 90s, so on and so forth, and there's so much more freedom into being able to just pick everything and to be able to go from, like you said, and I love that mix too, where you do Under Pressure into Ice Ice Baby and finding the right time to mix it. How do you approach a club set versus a wedding set?
Well, so there's a lot of different things that actually go into preparation for both. So that being said, what was the question again? It was the difference between choosing music, right? Or preparing.
Exactly. How do you approach your sets? How do you prepare them? How do you kind of go into, I am very known for, I don't pre-plan my sets. I come in with a clean sheet of paper. Maybe I've got a couple from the request list that I sprinkled in, but I know that there are other DJs that have a more, like where even the night before they'll sit there and they'll pre-program their sets.
So for weddings, I kind of do the similar approach as you, but while I'm physically at the weddings, I kind of float in and about the crowd and try and get like a feel for the guests that are there. And like, is it a younger crowd? Is it a little bit older crowd? Are they in between? Is it a mixture of a bunch? Or there's smaller kids here? Maybe I have like, a little Baby Shark remix I can throw in for them, some stuff like that. And then, obviously, of course, starting with the base of, with the bride and groom, what they want to hear throughout the night. But then, I kind of like crowd surf in and out and like, as I'm, people are transitioning from cocktail hour into dinner and stuff, like just kind of looking at my crowd and observing them and trying to get a good feel for like what type of music they might enjoy. Also, when I put on certain music for cocktail hour or dinner, if I get certain responses from those playlists, then, that also gives me information on things that I can play. Clubs are way totally entirely different, even down to preparation because of the equipment that's used. Us, we have our what are technically considered quote unquote controllers, DJ controllers. They're USB controlled by plugging into the laptop, which has the DJ hardware on it, or excuse me, software on it. The controllers are hardware, and then that's how we control. And then our library is either on an external hard drive or inside our computer, and then we choose our songs from there. And almost every club setting now, and every like all clubs that you go to, if you're asked to play, you're going to be expected to be able to know how to play on what are called CDJs. Back in the day, they were digital controllers that have all of the software built into them. So like the wavelengths, all of like basically all the sound cards, all of that stuff built into them. They're basically computers specifically built for DJing. And back in the day, they would accept CDs, and that was, you would put all your tracks on CDs and burn them, and then that's how you do it. Today, luckily, we have USBs. But you still need a specific software to prepare the USBs to be able to play on the CDJs. So it's like a multi-tiered process. So the first step is get a USB that has FAT32 formatting on it, and you format it on your computer. Um, Download Rekordbox, which is the only CDJ right now. I'm pretty sure the only CDJ approved software for getting your files ready to play on CDJs. Make sure your Rekordbox is always updated. Hopefully the CDJs that you go to play on are also updated, because if the software that you use on Rekordbox is, if like the versions are not the same, when you go to plug your USB in, you'll have errors. I've had it happen to me before. I went to go plug in my USB at a club, and none of the cue points I set in the software were there. So I kind of had to mix literally by ear that entire evening. I mean, it's something you should know how to do at that point, but it still just makes, having the cue points makes life a little bit easier. So once you've got Rekordbox ready to go, you import your library. And when I'm building sets for a club, it depends on whether I'm opening, closing, or headlining. Most of the time I've opened, so I try to choose songs that most people describe my sets as vibey. Like I play house, but they're like, like they can sit and bounce their heads and kind of just like chill and be cool. If they can dance if they want to, but it's not super high energy. Like the person they're like ready to throw all their energy out on the dance floor for. So I pay attention to the Camelot system a lot and the keys of my music when I'm planning my sets. And as far as house music is considered, I like to throw a lot of homages back to 80s and 90s disco, funk, and like I guess let's say like African American music. So like I have things like I'll mix in stuff like Patrice Rushen, Forget Me Nots. Let's see what else. The Beat Goes On by the Whispers into my house music mixes, because that's, I feel like that's where I'm originally from, the Midwest. So a lot of Chicago house is derivative of that. And that's where I'm from. So my sets are inspired by that. Whereas West Coast house and East Coast house are very different. House is different. And, music is different depending on what geographical location it kind of evolved from, depending on who influenced it. That's just a fact. So when it comes to planning my sets, that's what I do. Choose my songs, then I have to export the playlist onto the USB. And then hopefully if I have time before my set, I'll go to a friend's house or Guitar Center and plug in the USB into CDJs and make sure that everything works. And so that was...
I'm not sure if you've listened to the show or seen any of the titles, but I always come up with a witty title based upon some of the things that we talked about. The title for this show is definitely going to be Grant Bass and the FAT32 of Doom.
Yes, I like it.
This is the first, and again, this goes back to you and I are both very technical people, and we're also creative people. For those who don't know, FAT32 is a file system. It's if I'm not mistaken, is it Mac only uses FAT32 now? I got to a certain point where I stopped paying attention. But FAT32 is a file system, and if something's for FAT32 and NT, yes, Mac is FAT32, Windows is NTFS, and the two will not talk to each other at all. So that's why if you've got a hard drive that is formatted to NTFS Windows and you plug it into a Mac, the Mac's going to go, thanks, what am I supposed to do with this? When you're working with your couples and they come to you, as a lot do, because music again is I feel like people or don't quite appreciate their love of music. So like, I don't know music, and I always go, you do know music. What do you listen to in the car? Oh, I listen to this, and this. These are the bands I like. These are the bands I like. So you love music. You just don't necessarily know it. So you get one of those couples and they come to you and they're like, they're lost. How do you guide them through choosing event songs?
Oh, that's easy. Like, people just have to be reminded. Like, and that's the thing too, is music. I think that's the thing about how where people like music but they don't appreciate it, and that's because it's in the background of everything that we do, like subconsciously. When you go shopping, there's music always on. uh, TV commercials, there's music on. Backgrounds of TV shows, music sets the mood. Backgrounds of movies, everything. Music universally, and I hate saying this, but it low-key subliminally does a lot for us, to the point where I think people don't actively pay attention to it in that way anymore. So when my couples are having difficulty choosing event songs, I always think of, well, think back to a specific moment in time where you remember feeling really good, or a memory where you were really happy, or just a memory of the both of you, and try and remember a song that was playing in the background. Or maybe even take a song. A lot of the time, people really like choosing songs from, that high school, middle school, like through college era, when they were, finding out their music taste, because during that time you have a lot of transformative and important milestones in your life, and music is a huge part of that. Prom, graduation, maybe some crazy party that you're going to tell your kids about, but you remember that one song that was on in the background, and maybe that's where you met ma. That's where you met mom at. Things like that. Like, I always tell them, like, just think about those special moments in your life and then try to remember. Or, like, if there's songs that you literally cannot get over, that you find yourself always playing, find a way to make that a part of your wedding. Or even I even like to reach far back and tell them, go back into pop culture, the things you like. Like, I mean, I've had brides and grooms walk down the aisle to the Star Wars themes, and Doctor Who themes, and things like that. When it comes to picking songs for weddings, I think people get caught up on having fun and being too formal for the sake of not only tradition but also family, and wanting to ensure that everyone has a good time. Um, but at the end of the day, it's about the bride and groom. It's about the bride and groom. And if, like I said, if you want to walk down the aisle to Star Wars, whatever, if it makes you happy and it brings you those same fuzzy feelings as, the first time you heard that music, or it connects to a memory that brings you those fuzzy feelings and makes you happy on your wedding day, then I say go for it. Like, it's your day, and choosing music that's special and important to you is so important, because, like I said, yes, music is subliminal, kind of like in the background of everything you do. But I like to tell my couples, you are literally building the soundtrack to one of the most important days of your life. And a lot of people are very, very picky about their music choices, and I appreciate that. And the ones that need help, it's a very fun process, because in that same instance, as I'm walking through them making their choices, I'm getting to learn more about them and their music choices, which then in turn helps me on the dance floor later on. Sometimes I don't get to get that in depth with people who already have those choices, made, but it helps the planning process move along a lot easier. So there's trade-offs there.
You're nowhere near as old as I am, and by default haven't been DJing as long as I have. So you don't really remember the time where all of the wedding songs were pretty much the same. It was, Canon in D, Here Comes the Bride, and then the wedding march. And now couples are showing a lot more freedom. So when I get couples that are like, well, I don't know what's usually played. And I tell them, don't worry about what's usually played. Worry about what you want.
Exactly.
How can we interject your personality into this? And you mentioned Star Wars. I remember when Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2 came out, and I just talked about this in the intro of last week's episode. When Guardians of the Galaxy came out, I started noticing Hooked on a Feeling and Come and Get Your Love. These were staples of my play sets. They started coming in, and I'm like, why are these songs always... These are couples who are younger than I. Why are they now interjecting these songs? And then I saw Guardians of the Galaxy. I'm like, that's why. So that takes care of the special event music, grand entrance, first dance, yada yada yada. What about dance requests? What about, you get that couple and that's kind of the area where a music lover differs from a DJ. We look at songs as how we can build energy and momentum, whereas couples tend to just say, well, these are what I like to listen to. So how do you take that couple that here's the music we like to listen to, how can we translate that into a dance floor setting? How do you work with them?
That's a really good question, because I'm thinking about times where that's been hugely successful, and then I'm also thinking about times where I've had a request straight from the bride and groom, and I have to honor it, and it unfortunately kind of killed the dance floor. But I'm going to stick on the positive side of things and say that my favorite thing, honestly, is when a bride and groom present me with a Spotify playlist and they're like, this is some of the stuff we like to listen to, but you don't have to play all this, or it doesn't have to be played in order. This is just an idea of what we like to listen to. And I'm like, that is beautiful. That's perfect, because now I can go through, listen to. And then the beautiful thing about Spotify is, then if I click on one of those specific songs, maybe I'm into it, or maybe I'm like, whoa, this is really good. This is going to get the dance floor going. Then I can be like other artists or other similar artists. And then it'll take me, it kind of expands on this whole network. And then in that way too, I also get to learn, maybe discover some new music myself. One of my favorite weddings I did, I can't remember the bride and couple's name, the bride and groom's name, but I do house music for my club events, and they were actually fans of Nora En Pure and 8-Bit Lolitas and a few other house artists that I hadn't really heard of before then. And it was a beautiful, growing process, getting to know them and exchanging music tastes and things like that. So honestly, that's one of the best things, is when a bride and groom is just like, hey, this is a Spotify playlist, kind of like the music we like to listen to, just to give you an idea of what we like, and going from there. And then interjecting like I said, interjecting their personality is just finding ways, again, to drop their song choices into the main mix of the evening. So you might be playing say they're fans of, more, current top 40 stuff. And maybe you're playing like some 80s dance or 90s hip hop. And then, 30 minutes in, oh, boom, you just drop one of their songs on them mixed in perfectly. And it's something they've never experienced before. So then you're not only giving them that experience of mixing in their favorite track with something they may have never heard before, but you're kind of like, I guess that's a DJ's way of interjecting, the bride or groom's personality into the mix for the evening, or into the open dance section of the evening. So, the guests that are there can be like, oh, dude, I remember this song. This song's always on your playlist. Or, maybe the groom's buddies are like, oh, heck yeah, we drank so much beer to this in college. It's all about, for me, DJing weddings are kind of, because it's such a major milestone in two people's lives, it's kind of also about reminiscing all those memories up into that point. And music has a way of kind of allowing you to do that through memory.
I remember that. I'm pretty sure that the couple you were talking about, that was the one that was gravitated to you specifically because of Tropical House, correct?
Yeah. That was a different one, because I think the Tropical House one was actually at Lorimar. The one I did that was Nora En Pure, they were at Galway.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and that's the one of the reasons why I love having you on the crew is you and I have very different musical taste, and that allows me to match up. So when we have couples who like house, and a little bit later on, we're going to talk about your actual producing of house music. But you mentioned, having to work in couples requests that may or may not fit. They have an idea that, I want you to play this song during dancing, and you may sit back and go, okay, that's not really great dancing. And there are moments in the timeline where we can dump those and not hurt the momentum. So how do you use the timeline to kind of keep events flowing and to keep because I think that's another difference between DJs and club MCs or wedding DJs and club MCs is club DJs, there's not really a timeline. There's not really a flow. It's just, things, it's just kind of a straight line. Whereas weddings, you've got a lot of ups and downs and peaks and valleys. So how do we use the timeline to help create the energy and atmosphere?
So, well, just to clarify on the club DJ thing, there is a timeline, kind of, but as far as what you were saying, is it being straightforward, you're 100% right. Like you come in, it's like this guy plays for an hour, the next guy plays for an hour, the next guy plays for 45, the next guy plays for 30. Sometimes you have to deal with, one-off things, or maybe like a DJ not paying attention to the time and going over. But weddings you have to deal with so much out of the blue situations, like in between cake cutting and bouquet and garter, the bride and groom, they need to run to the restroom real quick, or they have to actually get the garter set, or they can't find the bouquet, or wait, mom's missing, and so you have to kind of like play music and fill in those gaps in time. And sometimes I will if there's songs that aren't exactly good for dancing, or that are just good for casual listening, cocktail hour, dinner, in between those little pauses in time where we have to take intermissions because we're getting things set up, that's when I'll throw in those little those song choices that may not be very good for the dance floor, but are still a request, and I'm sure the bride and groom would love to hear, as well as some of their guests. It's not difficult to find time during weddings to make placements for those songs. It really isn't. There's so much, even if it's like I'm trying to think. Oh, because sometimes I'll even play gentle music, like low enough behind myself when I'm making announcements and stuff right before dinner. So then when I'm done making the announcement, it's not lull, and I just turn sound up a little bit, like, you know what I'm saying? So the sound was always there in the background. So even things like that. So like maybe I play one of those songs that's not good for dancing, but is one of their favorites. I started off, and I go and make the dinner announcement and, dismiss tables. And now I'm done speaking. So now it's quiet in the background. I go up to the decks, and now it's louder. And now all of a sudden, oh, that's our song. And it's kicking off dinner for them. So things like that. But it's really not difficult at all to find those extra gaps in the evening or points in the timeline to make those song placements at all.
I always have kind of used the phrase that to define when dealing with a timeline is that the wedding coordinator is the ultimate planner. They have drawn the roadmap, but the DJ is the guy driving the bus or gal driving the bus. We know when to speed up or when to slow down to kind of keep building towards that foundation. And like you said, there's times where we can slip it. Okay, we can take a little bit of a break now and breathe a little bit. Okay, now we've got to put our foot on the accelerator and kind of go through things. You brought something up that I didn't talk to you about this, and I hope you're okay with this. But it's something that I wanted to talk about because in the current world we're living in, I think a lot of people, their eyes are finally opening, and my eyes certainly my eyes started opening as I started meeting you. You mentioned African-American music. Grant, you are an African-American DJ, although you're just a DJ to me. But you did bring an experience and you and I have even faced this at an event where someone came up to you and said, why don't we play some of his, they were talking to me, why don't we play some of his kind of music? And my jaw dropped. And so if it's okay, share some of the experiences. What is it like being African American in a world that is, I don't want to say it's not diverse, because the wedding industry is very diverse, but you still see more often than not, DJs tend to be white guys like myself. Oh, hold on. Okay. I had some buzzing, so I wanted to pause so that I can edit the buzzing out. So go ahead.
No problem. No, I'm actually glad that you brought that up. Ironic. So honestly, the biggest thing that I run into, I think wedding wise, which really it's not really a big deal. I think maybe, and it happens a lot. I've had it happen all the time with phone interviews and stuff. I think when people talk to me over the phone, because of how I articulate myself and I speak, they can't really tell the color my skin is until I physically meet them at the wedding. So I've seen some, people can't really always hide their reactions. So I assume, oh, you're the DJ kind of thing. And that might even chalk up to the fact that I'm young too. Or like I've been setting up the equipment, and because I don't wear my, nice clothing while I'm setting up, because, I might sweat a little bit or whatever, I've had people come up to me and just assume that like I'm the help and ask me general questions about things I might not even know about the venue or things like that. Like if I frequent in the venue a lot, then I'll definitely try and help out. But it's just like, it's like going to a store and you're just shopping and someone comes up to you and is like, hey, where's the, so and so? And you're like, I don't work here. I'm just like here to do a thing and leave. Um, the one of the worst things that I encounter though, that I really, really, really hate, I get it more so often in clubs than I ever do at weddings, is when people, because I wear a mask when I DJ, and I'm usually clothed from head to toe. I look like a Sith Lord when I usually DJ. I don't know if anyone really knows my DJ persona, but I can explain that later. But once they figure out that I'm black underneath there, it's like, oh, why don't you play some hip hop, or why don't you play some Ice Cube, or why don't you? And I'm like, really? And the thing is, that really hurts when I'm like at a club to play house music, and the people there know that that's what the club plays, and they just throw that out at me, and I'm like, really? Like, because it's just like it's like one of those subtle forms of racism that like it's annoying, but it doesn't really demand that much of a response because I'm not gonna let it take up that much energy out of my day. At weddings, it's a little bit more subtle where maybe I'll get a request and it is for something rap, and they're like, oh, you don't know that rap artist? And I'm like, oh, not like I'm not a walking encyclopedia of hip hop just because I happen to have a darker skin tone. Yes, it is a certain genre that I appreciate and definitely enjoy and love, but does that take away or detract from my blackness because I don't know the specific artist that you're speaking of? I don't think so. But it's really, honestly, I'm blessed because I feel like music and DJing is one of those avenues I can kind of escape that, especially more so than, my second job, which formerly was being a server. Bartending is definitely not as bad anymore, but serving was definitely way worse with encountering that type of stuff. But that's really honestly about it, is like people just expect me to play a certain type of music, and I'm like, that's cool and all, but this is like, I'm passionate about a specific type of music. And oh, hey, if you did your research, house music actually, especially where I came from, originated from Chicago. So it has roots in gospel, funk, and disco, and it came from black people. House music came from black people, so technically it is black people music. Surprise.
Well, but just the thought process, and that has actually happened. The situation that I was talking about, where someone came up and said, "Play his kind of music," that has happened a couple different times with me, and both times I was the DJ that I was working with loved so many different styles of music, and I kind of clowned the person. It was like, well, they like Foo Fighters. You want me to drop some Foo Fighters on you? This idea that you have to like or you have to know a certain type of music simply because the color of your skin isn't. No, I mean, and honestly, I think if you trace it back far enough, all music would have some kind of roots in African American culture or Hispanic culture or something like that. Like Elvis, Eminem famously says that all Elvis did was take black music, and because he was a white artist, that's what made it palatable. And if you think that Elvis is the kind of birth of rock and roll, it's all. So,
Absolutely.
so does that mean I can't play any music? And I don't want that to come off insensitive. The thing that I love about you, Grant, is you and I can have these conversations, and we sat around and talked, because I don't know what it's like to be a person of color. I never will. And so just talking to you about it, and you grew up in Indiana. My dad is from Indiana, so we've got a lot of commonality in that. But it's just being able to kind of see things and not, I won't understand it, but at least understand that I don't understand it, and know that
The most important part. And that's just where it starts. And that's why I said I just even appreciate you, because it was one of those. And that's the thing about those occurrences. And like you said, I appreciate you bringing it up, because it was one of those things that happened. It was real quick, one-off situation. We laughed about it, and like for me, I put that in the back of my head because it happens. But again, having conversations about those occurrences is what's important. And like I said, it would have been funny if I had thrown on some Linkin Park, or maybe some Beethoven, because like, yeah, I listen to a lot of different things, and it does, or maybe even some. I would really freak them out. My people music. If I listen to some of the Japanese hip hop or OSTs that have on my playlist, like, music is universal, and it's about the feeling that you get from it, and because it derives from one it's good to acknowledge where the cultures where music is derived from, but that doesn't mean that it's exclusive.
Exactly.
And
I
that,
mean, music is the universal language. I remember when Captain EO came out again. This is way before your time. I remember going to see it, and it surprised me because there were a lot of people there who they weren't Americans and they didn't speak English. That's the important part. They didn't speak English, and I'm like, why are they watching this? They don't understand what he's saying. And you know, my grandfather said, well, music is a universal language, and that's right. It's the one commonality that all of us share together. And yes, you may prefer this type of music or that type of music, but if you dissect them, you're gonna find out that there are similarities and influences between everything that they do. And that leads into the next part, because Grant, you actually are a producer as well. Like you create music, and you've got your Spotify page. Look up it's just Imhotep, right?
well, yeah, but you have to have the underscores,
Okay.
either side, because
And we'll put a link in the description so you can go check that out. But that's the thing that I'm fascinated with is you know, how you can create music, because you're not sitting at a piano, although even that fascinates me. Like, I have a theater background. I know writing. I can sit there and I can type out a script, but creating music is, even though it's very similar to me, it's an alien concept. So how do you produce a track, both coming from inspiration to the technical side of it to the finished product?
Okay. So
All that in
I
about
have to,
5 minutes, please. No, I'm just kidding.
well, I I do have a bridal call coming up soon, but um, I can suffice pretty easily say. So the biggest thing that happened, so this is like, I guess, a small synopsis of my music journey. Um, the thing about making music now is it's very, very compact. You get these things that are called digital audio workshops, or DAWs. There's all different types of them. And they literally have, when you'd walk into, like, like a Los Angeles studio, or like an auxiliary studio where you have to plug in all the instruments and all the like different pedals and the effects and systems and stuff. All of this is inside of a software package. Okay. Yes, it's very expensive. Um, so my first step in that was dissecting the software, getting it installed. And so I remember I came home, I think it was after my freshman year in college, that entire winter break, I spent those entire months like just locked away in my room figuring out the software. Um, I had at that point no music theory background. So I just, it's the what is it, the mastery rule, where after so many hours you just kind of start to get good at stuff. So I just kept tinkering with the software, tinkering with like figuring out keys on the keyboard. A lot of my production for the first few years was sample based. I'm not ashamed of that at all. Music can be created in a whole bunch of different ways. Now it's still pretty much sample based, but I also throw in my own melodies and things like that, because when I was out here in California, I did take a couple music theory classes. Like, going from inspiration to just creating music, like, I mean, uh I guess the best way to put it is, like, right now, while everything was kind of on hold and I wasn't working and everything, we all had to be quarantined, it was hard for me to find inspiration to create music, because I find my inspiration from life as it progresses, and the stories that I find going on not only outside of my own but within my own life. And just like, you know, like it comes from anywhere. You have to leave yourself open to whatever. Like you can't, I think limiting yourself in a way of thinking like music can't be created from everything hurts you. Like there's a guy that I know, his name is Sean Wasabi. You follow him on Instagram. I mean, he makes music out of everything, out of the most random sounds, like tapping on a table, like the sink running, like the craziest stuff. So my whole idea behind that is like I just kind of like sit back and relax and let life occur as it does. And when the light bulb switches on, it just switches on. Like for instance, one of my favorite songs that I actually did recently, I was watching 100 Humans on Netflix, and they're doing these little experiments and stuff. And one of the things is they're trying to figure out how wordy human beings are, and how wordy young people are and old people are, and how wordy um, men and women are. And they asked people to talk about tic-tac-toe. And so this guy literally starts singing about tic-tac-toe. And I thought it was cheeky, so I took it and used it as a sample in a song that is now called T Squared. And like that's just music. Like, and I think if you'll talk to a lot of musicians who are like not they don't take themselves entirely seriously, but they enjoy the craft and understand that there's a relationship to be had with it, that's where they draw a lot of their inspiration from, is just as life as it comes. And just random one-off things, like we're just thinking about things in the past, or whatever. Like honestly, I even had an idea for a lo-fi album that I was going to do here a little bit in the future, that was going to try and sample like from most of the 90s cartoon shows that I watched as a kid, because it's nostalgic, literally just for that reason. So there's a lot of different facets that go into it. Or maybe, you have some people have muses, some people take things like by one-off events, like, maybe traumatic events happens, or, you got promoted at your job, so you're feeling really good and you decide to write a song about that. There's all different types of ways to create, but specifically for me, that is how I create. Is I just kind of like sit back, relax. I don't feel pressure to keep coming up with stuff every single day. But when I'm inspired, I create, and, I build upon that. That's really as simply as I can put it, honestly.
So to quickly summarize, and wow, I'm going to have to bring you back again, because we're this is going to be the longest episode ever, and it's great stuff. I'm fascinated, and we haven't even from the producer side. You'll take a sample and through software just kind of manipulate it to where it kind of creates its own tone, and not necessarily tone as in mood or anything, but its own melody or anything like that. So that's essentially how that process works.
Yeah. Yeah, like especially with digital audio workshops these days. I mean, like I said, thank God for technology in some aspects and not for others, but it makes altering sound very easy. And I mean, one of my biggest inspirations for that was when I found out that Daft Punk's Discovery album was like mostly all samples from dance music that predicated the early like electronic music scene.
Well, thanks a lot, Grant, for taking some time to talk to us. Again, like I said, there's questions. I actually did my homework with you, and there's questions that I didn't. This episode is reaching an hour long, and we still got to get to the Fast Five. We got to do the Fast Five. The Fast Five is where we will ask you 5 of the questions that are just the controversies that are haunting society, and until we get to the bottom of them, we will never really be whole. So, Fast Five, first one, Marvel or DC?
Both, because the artists swap back and forth between each other. If you do a lot of Marvel and DC research, the artists went back and forth between the companies, and there's like that's why so many of DC and Marvel's characters, like as far as the superheroes, are kind of like share similarities. The artists were stealing back and forth from each other. So I'm on the fence with that one. I sit firmly on the fence and will stay there. You're allowed to like whichever one or both.
I like that you are equally appreciative of both. My answer to that has always been DC for the comics, because I think DC puts out a better comic product. But Marvel Studios, Kevin Feige, he knows how to work a a movie series, and I even think Disney can learn a lot from what Marvel's doing on the Lucasfilm side.
I'd agree with that.
Someone asked me this the other day, and that's why I wrote this down for you. Batman or Iron Man?
Like, they're both just dudes with a lot of money at the end of the day. Uh, if I have, like, it's hard to pick. It's really hard to pick because Iron Man's suit is dope. But when you think about it, at the end of the day, Batman really just decided to dress up in, like, like a fairly armored suit and just go out and beat up bad guys because of the traumatic experience he had as a child. So I like Tony Stark. I really do, but I probably have to go with Batman on this one because Batman is just like, he's just out there. He's just doing his thing. But they are just like crazy rich dudes at the end of the day.
and that's exactly how I answered that question is, I like the fact that both characters have their demons and they have Tony Stark has his alcoholism. Batman has the constantly wanting to please his parents who are no longer there. And ultimately I chose Batman because I don't think we'll ever have a Iron Man suit, but we could have a grappling gun and a utility belt. We could be Batman. If we aspired to, we could be Batman.
There are quite a few studios I actually follow on Instagram that make like legit bat suits. Just thinking about buying one with that stimulus.
See, there you go. A little music question: disco or funk?
They kind of like cross. They share a lot of the elements.
That's exactly why I asked it.
But I have to say funk.
I agree.
Just like, it has a little bit more soul to me. Like disco is purely dance, but funk, like, yeah, it just has a little bit more soul.
Exactly. I think they both share common themes and crossovers, but there is more of a poppiness to disco that isn't necessarily there in funk. Star Wars villain. Who's your fave?
Wow, this is going to be really hard because I've been playing Battlefront 2 the past couple of weeks. And I love playing as Kylo Ren. But I only like playing as him because his moveset is doper on the game. In the movies, I don't like the way he's depicted. It's cool. He at the end, I'm not going to try and spoil anything for anyone who hasn't seen anything. If you haven't seen Star Wars yet, though, I don't know what you're doing. But anyway, Darth Vader, 100%. Because, like, if you just look at the story of Anakin Skywalker, I cannot blame him for becoming Darth Vader. And then at the end of the day, he kind of just had to accept what he had made of himself. And then, at the end of the day, he realized, oh, dang, I got a son, I got family. Maybe I should like do something good and end my life on a high note. But like, if you look at the way Anakin felt, like the Jedi Council was responsible for neglecting him emotionally. Obi-Wan was not the greatest teacher. Like there were so many different factors that led to him becoming Darth Vader. And at the end of the day, like, yes, it was Anakin's choice to do all the bad stuff that he did. But at the end of it, he really just wanted to protect what was his. So I can't really blame him for that.
I have to agree on both fronts, actually, because I do like playing Kylo Ren in Battlefront as well. He's super fun, and he's got a lot of cool points to him. And then also on Darth Vader, the thing that I liked about Kylo is, like you're right. Darth Vader Obi-Wan wasn't the greatest teacher. Obi-Wan says that himself. I shouldn't have trained Anakin. Kylo had Luke, and he had more of the Anakin's story was becoming this and struggling with the realization of the powers, whereas Kylo was growing up in this family and dealing with the familiar pressures that come along to that. So I agree on both counts.
That too, Anakin was trying to like come to terms with his ideals and like trying to be a part of like the Jedi Council's ideas, how they were all strict about not having wives and stuff like that. But the thing is, at the same time, he was trying to get in with the Jedi Council, but then they granted him the rank of master and then didn't take him seriously after that. That's a whole nother story. Like I could get into how the Jedi Council totally mistreated him like for hours.
lastly, greatest villain, Thanos or coronavirus?
Like, uh, I mean, at least Thanos went away gracefully.
There was there was a good intention behind Thanos.
Yeah, I guess. But
In his own sick, twisted way, there was some good in what he did.
but no, definitely, yeah, definitely coronavirus. Definitely coronavirus.
Well, thanks for taking some time to talk to us. Now's the time where we turn it over to you. Tell the people where they can find you at.
So technically, I am on like all music streaming services, like even Tidal, Napster, like Spotify. To find me, you usually have to type in underscore capital I underscore MHOTEP underscore. So that's underscore Emotep underscore because someone else took the name first. Um, I'm also on YouTube. I make like weird GTA music videos because I like having a digital world as basically a set that I can use to do whatever because I don't have my own real life studio or set, movie studio or set to go film things. So I use that as a method of creation. I also post unreleased tracks there, and then I'm starting to post what I'm calling house therapies or home therapy, quote unquote. But it's like hour long mixed casts of house music and other like throwbacks thrown in there. Um, but if you want to reach me or just like want to send an email, like, and I will send you a straight up like gang list of everywhere where I'm at, just shoot me an email at 00gbass00 at gmail.com. And that's like the easiest way to get in contact with me. If you want me to make music for you, like I've done music for a couple of like infomercials, commercials for friends' video game project of mine, or if you want to collaborate on project or music or whatever, I am always willing to work with new people, get musically inspired, or just talk. That's fun too.
And of course, from a DJ side, you are a DJ for C Squared Events. So we have our Facebook page, C Squared Events, and yada yada yada. So thanks, Grant, for taking some time to talk to us. As I'm recording this, we're now just about the hour mark, which is so cool. And there's so many things that I didn't get to talk to you about. So thank you.
For sure. I mean, I'm always up for a volume 2. Thank you for having me, as always.
You're welcome. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode. Grant is certainly a very intelligent. So he and I are so much alike. We're both very intelligent, very creative, a little bit quiet, a little bit shy and reserved, which I know a lot of you are like, what? But there's a difference, when you put a microphone in our hands, we just come alive. I remember the first time I was running the photo booth at an event that he was DJing, and I was just floored. He was throwing out stuff left and right that I'm like, I had never even thought of to do. And so he's a really great DJ, and I'm really happy to have him on board for us. So this ends this special episode of WedCast. We'll be back next week with another episode, and look also for an episode of the Untitled Music Project. Should be coming out in the next day or so. You can catch episodes of WedCast on anchor.fm/WedCast. We're also on iTunes, Spotify, and all over the place. You can also catch the Untitled Music Project on mixcloud.com/C2Radio. And of course, you can find all of them at C2Radio.com. We've got links to past episodes of WedCast and links to past episodes of the Untitled Music Project on Facebook at C2 Radio. Maybe we'll be getting to Instagram pretty soon, but right now those are the places that you can find us. And of course, you can find the DJ side at C2events.com, at Instagram C2DJ. Facebook C Squared Events, and go check out Grant on his own Spotify page. It's Imhotep, so it's _Imhotep_, and listen to his work. Thank you for indulging me on this episode today, and we'll talk to you later.